Hi folks, so today's video is going to be on Inveraray Jail. So for centuries, Inveraray was the seat of the Duke of Argyll, and it was the principal seat of Argyll at the time. This was from the mid-18th century. The courts would meet in the townhouse in the front street of Inveraray. This would be up until 1807, when a well-known Edinburgh architect called Robert Reid drew up plans for the new courtroom and prison, which would include separate prison blocks for men and women. But unfortunately, this had to be scrapped due to a lack of funding at the time. Reid's proposals were later adapted by another architect called James Graham. He would simplify the design of the courtroom and reduce the prison accommodation by one 8-cell block. Work would start in the new buildings in 1816 and would be finished by 1820. The jail and courtroom opened in 1820 and remained unchanged until 1843, when the airing yards were built. These provided a secure place where prisoners could be exercised in the open air. In 1848, the new prison was completed. This was a model prison for its day, with 12 individual cells, a water closet on every floor, accommodation for wardens, a storeroom, and an indoor exercise gallery. It was also well heated and lit by gas. This was a far cry from the dark and damp original prison building. The jail finally closed on the 30th of August 1889. By this time, in comparison to the larger city prisons, the smaller county jails were expensive and ineffective to run. The Scottish Office undertook extensive renovations in May 1989, almost 100 years after the last prisoners departed from the prison. Inveraray Jail is now open to the public, and it now attracts visitors from all over the world. The old prison was completed in 1820 at the same time as the courthouse, and it would house men and women and children and the insane in 8 cold damp cells. Conditions improved after the Penal Reform Bill of 1838, and by 1849 all male prisoners were moved to the recently completed new prison. The new prison, completed in 1848, was a model prison of its day. It had 12 individual cells on 3 floors and a water closet on each floor, a washroom, accommodation for wardens, storerooms. The building was well ventilated and heated by gas-lit lamps. The new prison was designed to improve the character and maintain the health of its inmates. Although the prisoners were kept in separate confinement, working, eating and sleeping in the individual cells. With the completion of the new prison, discipline could be introduced under which prisoners were not supposed to see or even speak to each other at any time. From 1839 onwards, all physically fit criminals had to work in their individual cells for up to 10 hours a day. Most male prisoners made herring nets or picked oakum. Some with special skills were employed as shoemakers, tailors, and even joiners. Female prisoners, on the other hand, would pick oakum, knit stockings, or sew. Making herring nets and picking oakum were the main prison occupations at the time. Inveraray was a busy herring port, and the nets were sold to local fishermen. So oakum was a fibre that was from old rope that had been picked apart. It was mostly sold in Greenock, and it was used for sealing the seams in wooden ships, and sometimes stuffing for mattresses. So the prison actually kept records when it came to production. Records were kept, and the prisoners could be punished if they did not reach their quota. But also if they did more work than what was required of them, they were paid for this overwork after they left prison. So life in prison was made more unpleasant by such hard labour tasks as turning the crank machine, short drill, or climbing the treadwheel. It was thought that these useless and often exhausting activities would act as a deterrent and discourage prisoners from committing further crimes on release. So, over the years, thousands of prisoners were locked up in Inveraray Jail during the 69 years that it was a prison, but only 12 ever managed to escape, and even fewer of these stayed at large for long. So, the earliest known breakout was by 3 men that broke out in 1820, just after the old prison had been completed and while it was still insecure. About 20 years later, in 1840, 2 prisoners walked away in the middle of the night. The lock on their door was faulty and it failed to shut properly. They waited until the warden was asleep, and then they made their way through the prison and escaped through an opening in the boundary wall. Unfortunately, I've got no idea whether or not they were ever caught. I'm guessing they weren't, because there's no records of them being brought back to the prison. So in 1857, James McLaughlin, at age 15, escaped from the new prison. In the middle of the afternoon, he managed to fool the warden into thinking that he was in his cell when he was actually in the wash closet. As soon as the warden left, James went out through a skylight on the 3rd floor. The warden realised something was wrong, and he saw the rope hanging down the outside of the window. James was recaptured the next day. The best escape from the jail was made by 3 house robbers from Dunoon. William Dixon, John Campbell and John Duncan. They escaped during the night of August the 12th, 1874, leaving their cell doors locked. Their escape remained a mystery until John Duncan was recaptured, when it emerged that they had made a replica of the keys from lead they had collected. So, escaping from their cells, they found their own clothes in an upper floor cell, as well as a rope. They then opened the skylight, went down the rope, and went over the boundary wall before anyone knew. So, other than John Duncan, none of the other 2, as far as I'm aware, were ever caught again, and they must have lived out the rest of their life in freedom. So this was my video on Inveraray Jail. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking it and subscribing, and I'll see you all in the next video.